everybody. I'm thrilled to be on the panel. Nice to see all of you. I wish we were in person, but we're doing it this way for a while now, almost a year. So again, nice to see everybody. Again, my name is Evan Desatnik. I'm the Associate Director of Transfer Services at Massasoit Community College. And we have been remote for a year now, as we're in March of 2021, with a very, very little bit of hybrid activity going on for certain programs. But for our model since the COVID, we have been remote. So welcome.
I'm Tara Hilt. Thank you for having us today, Sydney. I work at the University of New Hampshire on the Durham campus, which is our flagship campus. There's about 13,000 undergraduate students on our campus. I've been in transfer for about 4 years now at UNH and worked with first year students before that for about 12 years. So I've been around the block a couple times. We have been very fortunate to have a pretty robust testing program at UNH pretty early on. So we have been in person, like students on campus, living on campus, attending. I think our in-person classes were about 60%. So that's pretty good. We did send students home remotely after spring break last year, as many campuses did. And then we did close for a little bit for remote learning after Thanksgiving. And then we extended until February 1st for our spring term start. But it's been relatively successful, I'll say.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Stano. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for asking me along, and good to see so many of you. I wish we were on the road gabbing at a college fair, but I'll take what I can get in the meantime. So I'm the Senior Assistant Director of Admission and Transfer Coordinator at Springfield. I've been in that role for almost 4.5 years. And I've been at the college in this particular iteration for almost 9 years, which I just had to do math in my head while also talking. So that's the kind of expert you've got on the panel today.
And could you remind us how your campus operated?
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah. So we sent students home at spring break last year. We opened up hybrid in the fall. We tried to make it to Thanksgiving, but had to call it a couple weeks early because of our increasing caseload. We've been back on campus hybrid for about 6 weeks. We don't have a spring break week this year. We have Wellness Wednesdays periodically throughout the semester. And then we end on a traditional time frame this year in the spring.
Great. Thank you all. So as you all saw, the name of this panel is COVID Keepers. What is the thing that maybe COVID, the pandemic, forced us to adjust or change in relation to what's happening? So each of us are going to go off and share what's our big COVID keeper. I'm going to kick us off. Mine, the big thing for us that we recognized, UMass Boston's been operating almost exclusively remote since about this time last year up until now. Very small percentage of our students on campus. So all of our recruitment has really been virtual. And the big thing that we started off with was completely overhauling our website, recognizing that we're an institution that so many students walk to, and they can't walk to us right now. So where are they walking? They're finding us, they're searching us online. So a big thing that we did amongst a lot of our transfer staff was what we call the click test. I tasked them all, what are the most important questions you get from transfer students, and how long does it take them to click to find that information on your website? So that was step one in our website overhaul, was to put front and center those main questions we get all the time: transfer credit, how financial aid, scholarships, application. We made that information very accessible. Kind of the next stage of what we're doing with that is trying to update the back end of our website. I'm working with marketing on this. I'm by no means an expert, but search engine optimization. So on the back end of your websites, there's all these tags and words you can place so that when students are Google searching, Boston transfer or transfer credit, UMass Boston, it's going to serve them up certain web pages as it kind of codes through it. That's an oversimplification. If anyone knows what SEO is better than me, but that's kind of the next stage we're doing, is really digging into our SEO and making our website a little bit more searchable for students. So kind of focus on the website was our big COVID keeper. Evan, do you want to tell us yours?
Sure. So when, I was asked to sort of thinking about what my COVID keeper would be, there's many, right? I think we all probably have more than just one, some things that we think are really great strategies. The one thing that came to mind for me was about our new student orientation and the way that we've looked at how to restructure new student orientation from a virtual perspective. So prior to that, prior to going virtual, our face-to-face orientation was consisted of sort of a longer experience for students, where students would go through kind of everything from policy, procedure learning, from a welcome and sort of a part one piece of it, where they would get all of the general information about Massasoit. And then after they did that, they would participate with the advising center. So the transfer services at Massasoit is part of what the department we're in is the Advising Career Transfer Center, so the ACT Center. So what we have done with taking the longer face-to-face orientation has been able to really divide that into a part one and a part two virtually, where students will be invited to 2 orientation sessions. Part one will allow them to do the policy procedure piece and really be able to they're actually going to take a class on our Canvas system, where they'll be able to do that and go through modules and have certain sort of quizzes or certain thresholds that they'll be asked to answer questions about that they learned in part one. But the advising part of it is now part two. So instead of having 30 students in a room where we'd be triaging, advising in a room setting, we've now been able to do our online advising in our part two of our orientation through Zoom, where students have a one-on-one experience with advisors. They also have a one-on-one experience with financial aid, who are also at those info sessions. So I think that it's been a really great change for us, because we've been able to really, from an advising standpoint, we've been really able to engage the students in a much more one-on-one setting, which has really, really helped us work with the students individually and give them much more of a detailed advising career transfer overview about some of the questions that they might have from the beginning, which if we were face-to-face in a room with 20, 30 students in a room, we probably would just be doing the registration piece of this. We probably wouldn't have been able, frankly, to get to every student to really ask them those questions and to really focus on some of those additional pieces of their onboarding experience. So that's been a major COVID keeper, I think, in my opinion, for us, sort of breaking down the way we look at orientation in a virtual setting. So a very, very quick overview of my COVID keeper. I'll pass it to Tara.
Great, thanks, Evan. There's 2 that I want to highlight, actually, because I just cannot choose between them. So having 13,000 undergrads, you can imagine that we have quite the volume of applications and inquiries and prospective students as well. There's actually only 2 transfer counselors at UNH on our Durham campus, which is mind-blowing sometimes. And the volume really does pick up. And as we all know, and I'm sure we'll discuss in more detail later, like students just don't communicate the same way that they used to, right? So email does not always cover it. And even when email is used, it's hard to get to all of those emails at one time. So for me, one of the largest COVID keepers at UNH is going to be the chat feature that was added to our website. It's utilized so much by students, and you can definitely tell what phase of the application process we're in by how wild the chat feature is, but that's the type of instantaneous feedback that students are really looking for, I think, right now. It has definitely required a lot of training on our part, both in tech savviness for different people on staff that weren't as comfortable with it, and also just for like how to be as onto the information that they're looking for, right? But the more that we continue with it, the more fluid it becomes, and I definitely see that keeping. The other
Can
that
I interrupt you, Tar?
Yeah,
It's just such a good point. How does your chat feature work? I think some people are like, is this staffed by people? Is it AI? How is it covered? Because I think that's a big question. I think a lot of people have.
Sure. So at UNH, we use something called Talk2. It's TAWK, and it took us some time to finesse what was the best practice for us, but I believe that it's only run from like 8 until 4:30. So during our working hours, though we use it for special events at different times as well. Like we just had an admitted student day over the weekend and we used it then too. We staff it with live humans, which I think is key to the success, right? There is an AI feature, I believe, that connects the student like right after they've been on the website for a certain amount of time, maybe 30 seconds, a minute, I'm not sure exactly what it is. There will be a little chat box that will pop up. And if you go to our website, you'll see it, but it will say, you know, we're looking forward to connecting with you. That's not a person, that's just an automatic feature. But as soon as the student starts typing in that, there's somebody on our staff on the other end. We did staff it with admission counselors originally, but our bandwidth, right? Just like everyone here, I'm sure there's only so much time, and it does take quite a bit of time. It's an added responsibility that we didn't have before. So now our phone team, our call center, and our reception area, 2 areas that maybe aren't as busy as they used to be, have kind of stepped up and are starting to take that. And then there's just an admission counselor as a backup in case the volume gets too high or the questions get too crazy. And just real quickly, the other thing that we do is space has always been a major issue at UNH, especially for our Office of Admission, where we have probably about 30 people on staff. And I mean, there has been quite a bit of juggling to make sure that we can, you know, utilize the space in the best way possible, but there's just never enough room to accommodate, especially our student workers. So we have not been, I think that there was maybe an underlying issue of trust, maybe that employees would work at their full extent from home. So we would read from home maybe during application season 1 day a week, but it was very orchestrated and controlled. And I think that over the course of the year, you know, a silver lining is that we've really been able to develop that trust and build it a little bit more. And I think that as an added bonus, I just don't know that we'll work a 5-day week in the traditional sense that we have from the physical office, so that we can maybe use some of that space for our student workers as well.
Thanks. Kate, you want to kick us off with yours?
Yeah, sure. So I have 1 and 1.5. They're kind of related. So right away, when things went crazy and everybody went remote kind of overnight, I had a bunch of travel on my schedule, you know, cafe visits and the like, mostly that were not going to be able to be completed. So I pretty soon after that, a week or 2 into the lockdown, started hosting virtual office hours on Zoom. I started out hosting them like traditional cafe visits, 10 to 1, because I already had those on the calendar. But then I realized that, you know, the volume and transfer, you know, we're small school, so our volume might not be, you know, as high as kind of an open office hour for a place like UNH. I cut down the time frames and tried different times a day, and I still do that. I have regular office hour times now for our closest community college partners, once or twice a week. And then I also have drop-in hours every day. And students can also sign up for appointments during those times. So I'm continually trying out kind of new ways to segment the population and the office hours to see what sticks. Really the signing up for appointments, you know, giving students kind of the accountability. They've requested, before I had the appointments on the schedule and I just had the drop-in hours, people would request to sign up for an appointment. So having that feature, I think has been a benefit. So, you know, we're still trying to figure out what sticks and what doesn't. And sometimes the answers to those questions are surprising. Like I have a 12 to 1 office hour on Fridays that I didn't think was going to be popular because it's on Fridays and usually, you know, not a lot of activity happens on Fridays. But that one's booked almost every week. So that was something that was, you know, so things are kind of popping up like that and keeping it fresh. Another thing that I'd like to highlight, and I've got some partners in the room here, some partners in crime, or partners in recruitment anyway. The 6 cooperating colleges of Greater Springfield, so AIC, us, Elms, Bay Path, Western New England, and Westfield. For a few years, we had been traveling around doing physical, you know, campus mini fairs for just us, you know, the 6 colleges of Greater Springfield. So if a student was interested in transferring to Western Mass, it would be a good resource for them. we started doing those virtually pretty much right away too. We continued doing them throughout the fall, and we're going to do them this spring and also this summer, because most of us have later deadlines. You know, our deadline is August 15th for like the drop dead deadline, and that's still, if we get somebody after that, we'll still, you know, review them like a lot of places here in this room. So those are two kind of virtual events that we've tried to maintain, and I think we'll continue. Like Tara was saying, you know, things, so much has changed in our workplace. I'm wondering if, you know, virtual events like these will take the place of the traditional cafe visit. You know, fairs are still great, and I think those can be well attended, but I'm not sure if the physical cafe visit on campus is, you know, it seems a little limiting now with the resources and the tools that we have. So I'm happy to talk more about that. I also hosted, Susanna from ELS and I hosted a couple of transfer counselor brown bags towards the end of the fall semester last semester, and I'm happy to share some of the highlights from that too when we get to the questions and stuff.
Thanks, Kate. And a follow-up question to what you just discussed was, how are students accessing these office hours? Do they sign up? Is there just a Zoom link they click on? How does it work?
Yeah, so actually if you, I'm glad you brought up your website, because we have changed kind of some of the look and feel things to make it a little bit more kind of intelligent for the end user, for the student prospect. So if you click on the link I'm going to post in the chat, that's our transfer landing page. And right at the top, there's a message from me, and right below that, there's the Zoom links, the hyperlinks they can click on for the daily drop-in hours. And then there's a schedule time. They can click on that bar and it'll bring it to our event calendar. We also host Transfer Tuesday at 2 information sessions as well, but those are very rarely attended and were when they were in person. Most of the time when I have somebody sign up, I ended up treating like an office hour, because it's, you know, really one-on-one attention that they would normally get. So I advertise them, I send it to kind of my Rolodex list of community college partners. I advertise it, email, text message, kind of, you know, I do some text messaging with a little bit of immediacy, like, hey, I'm on an office hour right now. If I don't have any appointments scheduled, drop in anytime, here's the link. And sometimes that, you know, oh, I'm right here, I'm gonna tap on that link and I can ask Kate those questions. So timeliness is huge, I think, for those.
Thank you for that, because I think one of the next questions I want to transition to the group about is, we recognize that some of these virtual ways we engage with students are here to stay, because, you know, students need that flexibility, they need that accessibility. But on the other side of it, I imagine other campuses like my own have found sometimes it's tough to see the same attendance for these virtual events. I'm interested if anyone on the panel could talk about any strategies or tips to get students to check their email or sign up for an event, or ways that they've tried to handle getting students ready. And I welcome the group if you have any good ideas as well.
You know, it's a shame when you sent along the list of potential questions and it said, how do you get students to check your email? I was like, well, great. I hope I get that answer too, because that doesn't, you know, the only responses I really get, like, with, you know, students will reach out to me via email, I'll correspond with them, but I rarely get a response to a, you know, kind of mass email that I send out, or even a group email that I send out to individual prospects. It's really the texting, you know, that is, you have to be around to respond immediately. That's the caveat, you know, you can't send a message at the end of the day and then bounce and then answer everything the next morning. You know, you got to be prepared to be around for an hour or two to get all those immediate replies. But one thing we've also found, which is really strange to me, and I was talking to another colleague about it today, a first-year colleague, we're getting more phone pickups, even though, you know, we're calling from home from blocked numbers, which, you know, and it's not like we're getting 80% of people to pick up. It's like, you know, moving from 5% to 15 or 20. But I think students are so zoomed out that they welcome a phone call, which is kind of strange, you know, and that is, of course, anecdotal. I'm not sure if that's really the reason, but it has been a notable change that we've noticed on my team, and I've noticed in talking with colleagues about.
Sydney, I'll add something to that. I crowdsourced on this one on my staff, actually, because I was like, shoot, I don't know. But one thing that my colleague Donna mentioned that I thought was really important was that anytime she goes, Tara, they're not going to always want to check their email, but they have to. She goes, we send really important things to their email. And I was like, yeah, but we can't make them check their email. And Donna said something that I thought was really smart, which is anytime she has a student in front of her or on text or any other time that she does communicate with a student, she reiterates the message that super important information is going to be sent through their email so that they can start to get the message that even if that's not their preferred method of communication, and certainly we utilize a ton of other options, it just kind of, you know, communicates the message that they really do need to do that a little bit for us.
Yeah, and I was just gonna, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kate.
Just to piggyback on that really quick.
Yeah.
We send a lot of stuff from Slate, kind of automatic response, and almost always it ends up immediately in the spam folder. So part of my script in reminding people to check their email is please check your spam folder too.
And I was just going to say real quick, the email has become such a hot commodity in terms of who's sending emails, where the emails are coming from. Obviously, departments want to send their own emails, faculty want to send email. You know, it's become really kind of a big deal on our campus. What I will say is I think one decision that was made from the beginning of this was that marketing and communications decided we want to be the oversee the emails being sent directly to students, because if every department sent 5 emails a day, obviously it would completely flood your inboxes, and it really wouldn't be streamlined communication. I think it's a wise move that we did that. However, you're fighting for real estate to get your message out there, though. I'm going to be frank about that. So we've tried to package the communications we send out for events that are happening on four-year campuses and the virtual events that are going on. We're definitely not sending out one event. We're trying to package those things and send those out. Also, when folks come on Zoom with us, we have drop-in Zoom hours throughout the day. To our ACT Center, we're really trying to reemphasize the events that are going on. So it might not be an email, but it might be just talked about in a one-on-one session. So, but it has become, like I said, hot real estate with the emails. So.
Thanks for that, Evan. I do want to draw attention to Nick's comment. I'm not going to put you on the spot, Nick, if you don't have an example, but I think you said the subject line is key. Do you happen to have any tips around that you want to share?
And that's not going, there we go.
We can hear you.
Okay. So some of it is just asking them a question in the subject line is helpful. Other times giving a directive instead of transfer info, and they're like, whatever. But when I'm scheduling something that says schedule your March advisor appointment, or what are your plans after Middlesex? So that gets a little bit more, and then sometimes I'll actually just get the response that answers that question in there. So even if they didn't read all of the email,
Yeah.
enough to engage a little bit.
Nick, that's a really good point. And I think I'm reminded of my own inbox and thinking, oh, when I see something that has a little bit of a different subject to it or something a little more catchy, I go, oh, I kind of take a second look at that versus maybe something a little more dry. So that's a good point.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I can only get one sentence out. I try to make it that. So especially deadlines is a good example, like preferred application deadline, June 1st, or apply now to Springfield to get a scholarship. I think that the scholarship messaging and the deadline has been positive for us.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, Kate, because something we've been talking a lot about is not the individual emails that we're doing around events, but some of our marketing and our communication emails. Been working with our marketing team to identify what are the general types of subjects that students click on more. And something that I learned recently was often if you have like the word video in a subject, because there happens to be a short video associated, there's higher click-through rates sometimes. If you use the word free or scholarship, you definitely get a higher click-through rate, which I'm sure we're not surprised by. But I also learned a lot of, if you put emojis in your subject lines, things will go to spam. So sometimes you want to be careful that if you put like characters or emojis in your emails, it's another reason it'll go to the spam piece. And then also what was the other piece around that that they told me? I think those were the main ones that I was like surprised by. And then 6 words is your preferred subject length. Who knew?
And then in the message, bullet points is the other big big thing, so they can see easily just through a quick skim. If you can't get it from a skim, that's great. And then the other thing that I'll do sometimes is I'll change the margins when I'm looking at it, so that it looks like it would be on a phone. So you can see, oh, wow, that paragraph is a lot longer than I thought it was. So then you can really bulk it down and give them the link that gets them to the resource if they want to go more in depth.
Thanks, Nick. That's a reminder of the mobile piece. And I don't know if any students are accessing so much more of their email and these events mobily, and how do we think about what that looks like? But Tara?
I just want to add something that might sound super rudimentary, but I think especially as all of these high-tech options go full speed ahead, sometimes it's important to remember the value of some of our old tools as well. Sometimes when we do see this issue where there's an email that we really can't afford to go into the junk mailbox, assuming that the volume of people that it's going to is small enough that it makes sense, I'll still use the mail merge feature because I can guarantee that that's not going to go to junk mail. So, you know, sometimes just don't totally get rid of all of the old tools that made sense in certain situations, I think.
In the brown bag in December, one of the things, and forgive me, if you're in this room, I can't remember who brought up this idea, but please identify yourself if you care to get credit. It isn't mine, but sending communications about events as calendar invitations, they had gotten some traction on that because a student, you know, you get a calendar invitation, you just click yes, it's in there, you get a reminder, you have the Zoom link right there. You don't have to go searching for it later. I don't know if we have the capability of doing that with our current bandwidth, but that was something that was brought up that I thought was really interesting too.
That's a great point.
Yes, I'd like to add something. I agree with you, Kate. I work for the Middlesex Community College for the 3-year student success program. So we have 200 students in our program. Very lucky that we can only work with just 200. And we have a very good system at Middlesex called Navigate. So we allow students to text and to email. And I know that a lot of students, they don't really check email. So what I do is I would just keep on the text because it goes directly to their personal phone number, and I will just tell them about the important events, and then I will call them through I will call them from this number, so please pick up the phone. And that has been really work because I know that they have been getting texts ahead of times who will be calling them, and that been really successful. Let's say tomorrow we will have a FAFSA workshop, financial aid workshop, or transfer events. I will be sending those texts to students who are planning to graduate this spring, and then they respond really well, and then they have meeting one-on-one. So through that, text is the most important things, and then calling and make sure that we are available. We do what we say, right? That's the most important thing. So.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that brought up a larger conversation just in general about texting. And I know there's a great conversation going in the chat, but it seems like a lot of individuals are using texting platforms as other ways to engage students. Does anyone want to chime in about best texting practices or ways that they found that's been effective for reaching students?
Yeah, just keep it short and simple. And I know that our text system is limited to 160 characters. Short, simples, and catchy words. Like Nick said, just keep it a bulletproof, and then who's the person that texting you, which is usually me in my program. So yeah, and that works. Just giving that personal touch, very important to students.
Go ahead, Brendan, please.
I was going to say that brings up a question that we've had on our campus is when we actually have the ability to text students, because as of now, there is no area or mechanism for a student to opt into texting. So there's some concern that we are reaching out to them and they haven't opted into that method of communication. So I would just be interested if any colleges are gathering that information, and if so, where and how.
It's a good question. I know that where I worked previously, we had an opt-in mechanism for students if they wanted to receive text messages. I'm not sure if we even have that, or there's just maybe an assumption. I don't know if other people feel the same way. We text until they unsubscribe. I don't know what others are doing.
Brendan, I think there's a system that both of our institutions use that when the student goes in to set up their profile, they opt in. So that's the preferred method that we use. We do send out a generic, I think, text for the opening of registration, but there's been pushback on even doing that. So I think the best system you have is anything that allows the student to opt in. And some of the advising applications allow for that.
Brian, do you mean like opt back in after they've already opted out?
Just no, I think one of the systems we use is that the student's assigned advisor or even their faculty member can text them. But when a student first goes into the system as a new student, and we try to have them do that during their orientation, they set up their profile and we explain to them that this is different than the emergency management text, that this is really a direct way for you to connect with your advisor. And that, or your faculty member. The way we try to sell it is if your faculty member is going to be out sick for the day, instead of going into Blackboard and doing, or Canvas or whatever you're using, and doing a classroom announcement, which you might not get, they can go into this system, select all the students that are enrolled in all their sections, and send them one text and say, hey, I have an emergency, I'm not going to be on campus today. That usually gets their attention and that they opt in. And as long as we let them know that we're not going to abuse it, and so far, I don't think we have. Students, I don't think, are against messaging. They just really want targeted messaging that's relevant to them.
Thanks, Brian. Another question that's circulating, which I think is on the minds of a lot of individuals that work on the four-year side, is we found that college fairs were one of our main lead generators, how we're getting students' contact information so they could reach out to them and communicate with them. Has anyone tried different ways to capture student information? I'll come out and say what we've done on our side was over the summer, we were doing a lot of those drop-in hours, the same as Springfield was doing, and we did create a short form. It just asked for first name, last name, and email for anyone that joined us in that drop-in. So we would put that into the chat. Not every student filled it out, but that was one quick way to say, we've met with you today. We want your information so we can follow up with you. And we also do have a chat tool on our website, the same as others do. And we do take the information that they fill out to get into the chat because they have to give their first name, last name, email, and we bring that information into our system as well. So those are two things we do.
One way, I've noticed a big tick in asks for preliminary credit evaluations, which we're happy to do at Springfield. Luckily, we do have the bandwidth to do that. But in order for a student to get one of those, I ask them to complete the inquiry form. Does it prohibit, if they don't fill it out, does it prohibit me from getting them that information? No, but 99% of the time they complete the transfer inquiry form that's online. They also have to, we have Slate, so they also have to basically complete that form to register for an appointment. So if they want to sign up for an appointment, they can always drop in. There's tons of options for them not to give us their information. And of course, it's not, I'm not going to make them do it if they don't want to, but kind of making it sound compulsory, but not actually making it compulsory to access services, I think is key.
Other individuals, anything different for lead generation or student information?
I would add just that the types of fairs that we have attended have really changed this year, right? Because a lot of our smaller, table visits or just smaller, more local fairs weren't happening in the same way. So we have like kind of piggybacked onto some of the bigger fairs that we would never have attended before as a school that gets most of our community college students from very local places. And that has generated some leads for us because, much like we did for our NETA fair, it's not just based on who stops by your table, right? So it's a different level, right? I wouldn't call all of those students an inquiry, of course, because they're not technically inquiring about UNH necessarily. So you're going to communicate with them a little bit differently, but it definitely has bolstered what we've been missing a little bit.
I've been doing some fairs, PTK fairs in particular, and they share the registration list afterwards. We don't put them in as inquiries, and we buy names from what was College Fish. I don't know if it's still called College Fish, it's PTK names. We still buy 1,000 of those a year just to see what we can do with them. We don't add any of those inquiries into the system because that would inflate our numbers, but we work those populations very similar with a little bit less communication than we would an inquiry who elected to talk to us.
I'll just say from the 2-year perspective, one of the things that we wanted to do right off the bat was try to make sure that transfer services were able to communicate the best point of contact for the 4-year school as fast as possible. So as Sydney mentioned, redoing the website, kind of making it more accessible from a virtual standpoint. We thought it would be best to have point of contact right on the main page. I can put it in the chat, the transfer services site, Massasoit's, to make sure that students, if they weren't multi-clicking around the website, if they could even find where we were, that once they found where we were, that they were able to get your contact, 4-year colleges, our partner colleges contacts right away. So then whatever events you had would actually provide lead generation to your website. So then that could be so they would filter to your events and to the things that you were doing on your campuses. And it's been, again, that sort of coincides with the amount of power, is the wrong term, the amount of power I have to send college communications about the events going on. So instead of, which has been a little more limited than in the past when we were more face-to-face. So what I'm trying to say here is that we wanted to make sure we got point of contact directly to the 4 years for the students to click and be able to outreach right away to you guys. So that was our attempt at lead generation on the other end from 2 to 4.
I mentioned you bringing that up, Evan, because I know a lot of questions in the minds of individuals that are in my position and work at other 4 years is talking a little bit about what the experience is for students at the community college right now. I think we're all, trying our best to find ways to connect with them, but you're the ones working with them. I'm not going to put you entirely on the spot, but are there any other tips that you have or any of the other individuals that are transfer counselors at the community college of ways that we could engage with students that's like thoughtful and impactful and not inundating them with, too much information?
I mean, there's so many, I'm looking at the group, there's such a wealth of knowledge on this panel, on this group and in the room. So I definitely don't want to take the whole answer, but I will just say that again, you guys being present, and this is all about presence, right? This is all about the ability for wraparound services to be present for students, to be able to say, look, if a student is, it's so interesting, of course, what's happened because we have the population of students that we interacted with on a face-to-face standpoint that just disappeared, right? And then you're trying to figure out how to be in front of these students and how to interact and engage with them in a way that provides those wraparound services. So I think for the 4-year colleges, the partnerships we've been able to have with everybody, to be able for you guys to be present, to have those open office hours, to have those visits, to have those virtual visits, to have those services right there for us to really be one click away for our students has been very helpful. A lot of the feedback anecdotally that I've received from students that I've worked with and the folks in our department have worked with have said the students are really, really happy that they go to this website, they're able to click on this thing for this Zoom session or an open house or whatever's going on at your institution, and they're automatically engaging with the right person, right? They're not searching for the right department in the right area. So that's been very helpful for us. And I think that's something that, again, COVID keeper wise, even if we go back to a face-to-face, a total face-to-face type of thing, we probably want to keep that as well, at least in a hybrid fashion. So just a quick thought on my end, but I welcome my colleagues' answers as well.
Hey, this is Jude from CCRI. Just want to add on, working with the community colleges, because most of our classes are virtual, what I've been doing is I also teach, but using our platform, we use Blackboard. So reminding students about transfer, reminding, such and such school that we're partnered with is having a virtual fair. So I would say to the 4-year schools, beyond just your regular transfer person, if you have relationships with specific department chairs, reach out to them because they're using some sort of platform if they're not meeting in person, where it's very easy in announcements to add those links, to add those reminders, add the contact, hey, if you're looking to go to Bryant, contact, et cetera. So I would strongly recommend reaching out to the faculty if you're friendly with them, or if you need them, reach out to your transfer person and they can connect you with the chair or somebody like that.
Awesome. Thank you. Go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, one of the things that has been really helpful for us is, given everything's remote, a lot of the four-year schools have created customized landing pages. And obviously not every four-year school has that ability, but it's a lot easier for the community colleges to send a student a link to a specific school. So if they're interested in looking at Sydney, UMass Boston, for example, I can give a student a link to UMass Boston. It'll list out all the different visit opportunities that the student has. So there are some institutions that will send me, a list of 5 different visit opportunities, and to be able to share that with students is a lot more difficult because you have to kind of pick and choose what to send it at what time. So from the four-year side, if you have that ability with your IT team to create a customized landing page, and whether it's by community college or just general, here are all the transfer opportunities this spring semester, it's a lot easier for us to be able to get that information to students. And it's a little less overwhelming for students to have one link rather than 5 different things that they have to then go and search through. So if that's possible moving forward, just something to consider.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I want to draw attention to something that's in the chat, which I think is great, is, and in the past, I think, at least at my institution, doing specific events for specific student types, student programs, there'd be like, well, it's so much work. I think the barrier to entry for us on the four-year side to create events is so much smaller in a virtual format. We don't have to book a room. We don't have to get food. And so being able to do more targeted programming seems to be something that some schools are doing. I saw UMass Lowell was talking about doing specific micro events. I know Nick mentioned doing a specific event for business. Does anyone else have any other examples of like targeted or smaller events that they've done that they've seen success with?
We do a very robust, we did a very robust accepted student open house virtually in April. 3 live virtual open houses this past fall. And we just did kind of a rehash with some live content a couple weekends ago. And that's been kind of helpful because we have a faculty session as part of that. And that can be sent to transfers too. So we have some programming that's available to students. I worked in fundraising and higher ed fundraising before I worked in admission. And segmentation is key in that business. And I think in ours too, but when we look at it, not as an economic, issue as more of like a substantive issue, dividing up by majors, by class year, by institution that they're coming from. You wouldn't send a letter soliciting $1,000 from a donor who gives 20. And it's the same kind of principle can be applied to what resonates with your students. What is gonna be, something that's gonna drive the student to your website or to this event? How are you gonna capture their attention and make them feel like this event was created for them? We have a luxury at Springfield in that we're a pretty small population. So we've always kind of prided ourselves on that one-on-one experience for all applicants. The more you can do that and utilize your technology and tools to help you do that, if you're a bigger place, I think will resonate with students when they're looking for kind of that pinpoint thing. Oh, I'm interested in Springfield. Yeah, but I really want to hear about the business program. Oh, there's a business session. Great, I'll go to that. And then that will prompt me to reach out to the transfer counselor or apply, what have you.
That's great. Another comment was about student panels, which I think is awesome, hearing directly from the students. Something else that's coming up in the chat, and I wanted to hear people's perspectives, is like live versus recorded content, because I saw on here doing a GoPro of your engineering labs. Has anyone done something new with like recorded or asynchronous content that they're finding students are interested in that maybe they hadn't considered before the pandemic?
Yeah, we finally have a virtual tour that's actually serves the purpose it should. And also most of the questions we get from students on the tour is, what does a dorm room look like? And not like, what's this state-of-the-art facility that I can use to study in? So, you know, we have a much more robust section of our Res Life website that lists all of the housing options, has pictures of dorm rooms that our ambassadors have sent that, you know, look really fun and funky and homey. So having those two things virtually, even as asynchronous content, we did a couple of live tours or like Instagram takeovers, but people now want to consume things not live just as much as they do live.
And speaking of live, a great question in the chat, kind of who's doing in-person tours? I show of hands. Tara, do you want to talk a bit about what that's looked like on your campus?
Sure. So we just had our first actually small blip on the radar where I don't know how you guys are managing on your campuses, but we went from yellow to orange for a 2-week period, which actually made me really proud of UNH leadership because it was earlier than I thought they were going to do it. And I think it was super precautionary, and it actually has made us able to just yesterday or today go back to yellow, which means that we can offer in-person tours. But other than that 2-week period, we have been offering in-person tours this whole time, which a little bit blows my mind, because when they first mentioned that, I was like, this is gonna last like 1 week. I did not see it working, but it's super controlled and definitely much more work, and it's a lot of limited capacity. So, you know, we've had to change the process a ton of times throughout this. It's definitely challenged our technological procedures on campus because, of course, you have to have that contact tracing in place if you're going to do that. And everything, I mean, at least in New Hampshire, everything depends on state regulations, especially as the flagship university. So it requires a lot of coordination and collaboration with all of the stakeholders, not just the people we're used to working with, to get in-person tours set. It also, I think, requires a lot of finesse with like managing expectations on the front end, right? Because it's a different tour than they would have gotten last summer or the summer before, where they could have entered, you know, so many buildings and interacted with so many people. Our priority has to be keeping our current students as safe as possible, right? Still recognizing that we want to get the information in front of students that are trying to make that very difficult choice of what's their best fit when it's so hard to really see in a very organic way what a campus really is. So, you know, just explaining right up front that this is what it's going to look like, be explicit with what it's going to look like, and give them more options for how to piggyback other tools to get information they might not be getting as much now, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. I would say I'm hopeful that the small tours are not COVID keepers. I don't know if others feel the same way. I think we're all eager to get our students back to campus, but I think it's great just to hear what other places are doing, because I know on our end, it's a helpful leveraging tool to say my competitors are having students on their campus, but we also recognize your point is really good that this is about the safety and how can we do this safely. And there's a lot of logistics that go into it. Let me look, there's a question. For those doing in-person tours, is there an info session component included with that, or is it just a typical tour? Anyone? Kate, yours has an info session as well?
Me?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we have an in-person info session. I think it's limited to 8 now, but yeah, we have to check basically every website every day to figure out who can come from where and who can and who has to have what. Luckily, we redid our original gym building on campus, Judd Gym, and made it into kind of the enrollment welcome center. So when they did that, they took one of the old gym spaces and turned it into our info session room. And it's really the size of like a large church. So it has, tons of space. We can do the small group in there. And I think our ambassadors are so awesome and they really do love giving tours. So, usually we have, in pre-COVID times, we'd have 2 or 3 students signed up to give a tour at any given time. And now if we have 3 students and we have 3 families, they each get their own individual tour. So, we've been able to, kind of mitigate it that way too. So even more personal touch.
Sydney, we are not always able to do the info session right now. So we have added, which we never had before, and I think it should stay, hope COVID keeper, like a recorded info session on our website that will direct families to before they come, because we're really, in order to make the on-campus courses work, we're utilizing almost all of our spaces so that they can be as spread out as possible, which means that we just don't have the right place to put somebody for an info session safely on campus. But on the weekends and this summer, we did info sessions as well.
So it definitely seems like a balance, and every institution's doing it a little differently. I know for ours, we just launched a driving tour, so no one gets out of the car, but you can, and I'm happy to put that in the chat because it was an interesting, but that's something new that we did, that who knows if we keep that, as we get, more ways for students to connect with our campus. But I want to be mindful. I know we're hitting about the 12 o'clock hour. So I want to give a huge thank you to all of our panelists, as well as everyone who joined that shared their knowledge. It's something that I personally love about NETA. I know everyone loves is we're all the experts and we all value the contributions of everyone here. So if anyone has any final last things that they want to share or say, I don't know if Brendan or Carolyn have anything else to add about anything, but just want to thank you all for your time and appreciate you joining us today. Anything, Brendan or Carolyn, about Carolyn, go ahead. I don't think I can hear you. Is it just me? Carolyn, we can't hear you.
Okay, yeah.
Are you muted on your computer, maybe? Nothing.
Well, I'll just plug for Carolyn again. Conference coming up next month. Go register, newenglandtransfer.org. Submit your conference proposals, submit your award nominations, submit your scholarships, or have your students submit scholarship applications. And we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Sydney, for hosting.
It's a pleasure when you're here, Evan.
Great job.